Well, it's a cold November morning here in Springfield, Tennessee today, and I'm out here trying to get my heat going and get this car going. And I wanted to show Jerry what's going on with this car this morning. I've got this motor set in place. We bought a motor mount kit that located the motor for us real well. The oil pan that got our sump back to where our motor has a real nice spot right there, pretty easy. Without having to do a lot of fabricating, that's really helpful. Now his transmission over here, the 4L60 series transmission, the body of it's shaped quite a bit different than the body on a 400 turbo or a 350 turbo. Same goes as a 700R4 if you put a 700R4 in one of these or one of these older cars. So where the housing around the converter drops right down, and then the body of the 400 is there, or the 350 turbo, these they kind of come out long, so that this area right down through here hits the front of this tunnel. Now it's very important that you get this transmission, don't let the body dictate where you put this motor. Vibrations are brutal, and you can get vibrations with these. They're a little bit longer, so if you let that motor and transmission angle down lower than the pinion and the rear axle, which I've seen that happen, I've got some cars out there running that it's happened, because of the transmission hitting the tunnel. It's best when you're at this level of it, just go ahead and not let that body dictate where you're going to put that motor. Put that motor and transmission where they need to be. So I'm going to actually cut his tunnel out. I've done went in there, marked, measured, had it in place. I'd actually need to bring this up about 2.5 inches in the rear, which is going to really require me to hog that housing out to get this transmission up in here. So I'll probably take his seat out, his carpet out, cut the tunnel out. Then I'll locate that motor to its most perfect spot I can get it in relationship to this body. And once I get that in place, then I'll go back and rebuild my tunnel, and then I'll have a nice home. There's no backing up. The motor's where it really has to be. Now in the front of this, I had showed you in video before where the steering arms are hitting the oil pan. That is one deciding factor that I'm going to try to work around. If my motor won't set level, I think right now I've got it, it's about 3 degrees down, maybe 4 degrees down, which isn't a bad spot because it's going to let my steering work okay up here as long as my tail shaft is okay at the rear. If my tail shaft is not in a good location at the rear, I will probably go in here and address something on this steering, which I hate to have to do that. So what I'm going to do is I pull this motor back out. I'm going to cut all that out where I've got it marked right there, and then put it back in place, raise it back up, and see if I have a good angle. If I do, then I can roll on with it. If not, I may have to do something with this oil pan, but I hope not. So let's get that cut out. Now a lot of people go in there and just hammer and beat that out. Some of the spots I can finesse out. This main front piece, it would take so much beating and hammering. I'll probably just cut it completely out, bend the lips up to where they need to be, where I can make a landing for a new panel, and then come in there and tack weld in a new panel with enough clearance for all that, and my transmission coolant lines. I have to run them down the side, so I'm going to go ahead and make room for that too. So let me get this motor out, cut my tunnel out, get my transmission back in there, and I'll show you how it looks once I get all that in place. Alright, I've got my motor in a real sweet spot here. Let me show you how it looks on the inside. Let's see here, got my seat out. I had my welding blanket in there that I got from Steve from Heat Shield. I love that thing. But I've cut that out where I have good clearance. I've gotten back up under here and put everything back in place. And then I'm actually going to do a little more finessing on that inside here. I've had out front here, I've got my motor set, it's around 5 degrees down now. I checked some these LS engines on different vehicles when they're setting level, and these motors actually set down. Some of them are about 8 degrees. I know I've got a Silverado out there right now, and it's down about 8 degrees. So we're at about 5 right here. Before I started pulling this transmission out, I took some very exact measurements. And took my transmission loose, and then I took some measurements to where the motor is at level, and it come to be about 2.5 inches that I had to remove. So to keep this down as few times in and out as possible, I took and translated that 2.5 inches just straight up. I did all my marks straight up, really planned, and laid that out nicely. Went ahead and did some finessing on the rear areas I didn't want to cut out, and then made sure I cut enough out that I think I cut out almost 3 inches up, or I went 2.5 inches up, and then I left a 1/2 inch lip that I could roll back around. And then when this comes back out, I'll be able to make a panel, and that gets me down to doing this as few times as possible. And I'm going to allow a little bit, so with my 5 degrees down where I'm at right now, I'm going to go ahead and finesse out in the tunnel maybe another 1/2 inch to where if we have to go up to 0, we can, but I think it's going to work out real nice so that it clears my steering so I don't have to touch any of that as it stands. I'm about 4 to 5 millimeters away from that pan where I am right now. So I'm going to yank this motor back out, then I'm really going to finesse all that up, make a panel that's going to glue in there that's going to look factory when it's done, and I'll show you what that looks like once I get that there. And then the next time the motor goes in, that'll be the last time we'll have to pull it out or put it in. So keep it down as few times as possible by taking some good measurements. Now inside here I've got all my floor cut and hammered in place. Then I seam sealed all my edges, and then inside here, let me show you, I've got my coolant mat down. Underneath this I got heat shield product DB skin on here. This skin where the underneath this mat, you can't even tell that floor's ever been cut out. I dotted it all down real nice right there, then I seam sealed it real nice all the way around, then I put this DB skin back on it, and it looks factory perfect. Now I'm fixing to get under here and do some wiring underneath. I'm going to put a signal converter for my cable drive on my speedometer. This transmission has a electronic signal that comes out of it with a Hall effect switch. I will run that into a little box that converts that. It's got a little motor in it that will spin my speedometer and make that work again. And then out here I've got my engine set about somewhere around 3 to 4 degrees down on my engine, and my tail shaft, my rear end is up about 2 degrees, and that's where it was factory, so I'm going to leave it right there, and I think that's going to work out real good. Get my drive shaft cut, and then I'm working on my wiring today. Got my column, fixing to take my column out so I can put this box unit up underneath here, and got my shifter working just perfect. I was able to change the geometry on the rod at the transmission to get my full sweep, because now I'm adding a gear to this column setup. So by changing the geometry down here in the bottom, it's going to allow me still to be able to use, you can see in there just barely in there, my neutral safety switch and my reverse light switch that's factory on the column by not changing anything on this end of it. And then I'll still have the sweep to be able to get all my gears with the overdrive. And that's about it for now. I'm fixing to get in here and do my wiring, and I'll give you another update later on it.